Hi, everybody. This is Mike Kerr, and this is The Last Watch. We have Derek Gilbert with us again today. Derek, thanks for joining us.
Mike, happy to do it. We're
It
living
is,
in interesting times, that's for sure.
it is. We are in very interesting times. It's Tuesday, September 16th. And for some reason, when I was getting ready to do this today, I keep thinking it's January. I don't know why. I guess it's wishful thinking, but we had like a rough week last week. Of course, it was 9/11 Remembrance Day, and then on the 10th, we had Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated. And what I'd like to talk about, Derek, I'd like to get your view on what do we do, especially as Christians, to move forward. We had some great memorials over the past weekend. Some of them were disrupted by woke liberals or whatever you want to call them. And we have another really big one coming up this coming weekend in Scottsdale, Arizona, that hopefully will just close the door. And I don't mean that in an insensitive way, but I think as Christians, we need to move forward from all of this because we can't do the work that we need to do. And it's a wonderful time right now as Christians to spread the word. People have united, and sadly, it seems to take a tragedy to unite America and unite especially Christians, and get them out there and get them in front of people and talking. And regardless of your political beliefs, you need to talk to people. And it doesn't matter if you're talking to a woke person or a liberal or whatever. It doesn't matter. He doesn't like care. He wants
Mhm.
you to feed his sheep. So, Derek, where do you think we go from here?
Well, I think you make a good point, Mike. It's easy for us to keep putting things off until, I've got more time or the kids are grown or whatever. Uh, Charlie, as people know, married, had two young children, and yet was still traveling around and doing a lot of work, getting in front of people and engaging them in discussion, which is, the irony, of course, as he was known for saying, is when we stop talking to one another, that violence happens. And here he was in the middle of talking when he was silenced because somebody didn't like what he had to say. That kind of made his point for him. But this was sort of like an ice water wake up call for a lot of us because the way it happened, this was really the highest profile. I would say political assassination, but that's probably not correct. He was silenced not because of his political views, but because he was effective at sharing a worldview based on the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
It wasn't, Tyler Robinson was just the human who pulled the trigger, but the principalities and powers behind the scenes are the ones who wanted to quiet Charlie. And we need to remember as Christians too that nothing happens to us that the Lord doesn't allow for his purposes. So when things happen, whether it's a health issue or somebody is taken away, in our view, too soon, it's part of the Lord's greater plan. And it can be difficult for us to accept, but we don't see the whole tapestry that is being woven. The Lord does. It's interesting that prior to Erica Kirk's address to the nation, just a little over 48 hours after Charlie was assassinated right in front of her, that she addressed the nation for 15 minutes. Very emotional, very powerful speech. I don't know how I would have been able to do. I don't think I would have been able to do it and keep it together if something like that had happened to Sharon. But within a day of her address, Turning Point USA had 18,000 inquiries on how to set up a new chapter at high schools and colleges all across the country. Prior to Friday, Turning Point USA had something like 10,100 chapters total around the country. So, in the matter of 72 hours after Charlie's passing, Turning Point USA is on the verge of tripling the number of chapters around the country and being a positive influence on young people and especially young men, because Charlie was one who a lot of young men were being looked up to. I've seen a couple of stories this week since that awful event last week Wednesday. of young men who would go to their high school, and the entire, student body, the young men, dressed in coats and ties to honor Charlie Kirk. And they weren't asked to do it by school administration. It was just a spontaneous thing, a grassroots thing. One father posting to X that my son came to me this morning, asked me to tie his tie for him. And I asked him why. Is because we're going, all the guys are, and the father didn't really grasp until he got to school and saw all of the young men going into this high school wearing jackets and ties. And like, okay, I'm 63. I was aware of Charlie Kirk, would not follow him closely. It's difficult, Mike, as you know, when you're creating content to closely follow what other people are creating. I knew they did a program on Real America's Voice. I knew that he was out there speaking on college campuses, his little table there with the sign, "Prove me wrong," and addressing people who were often very, very agitated and emotional in presenting their case. But it's like the Lord said through the prophet Isaiah, "Come, let us reason together." That's what he was all about. And we need to continue that, but to do it as the Apostle Paul commanded us, with gentleness and respect. Remember, Turning Point USA, although it was very effective in persuading young, especially male voters, of the worldview based on the gospel, and that the Republican Party better represents that. It's not perfect. The Republican Party, especially at the national level, has a lot of Republicans in name only who are willing to compromise for power's sake rather than promoting a particular worldview. But over the last 2 years, just look at the shift in political affiliation with young men, 18 to 29. It was like a 44 percentage point shift from and I forget the exact numbers, like 64 to 36 Democrat in 2023 to like 52-36 Republican majority, but a 44 percentage point change over the last 2 years. Now, was Charlie Kirk personally responsible for all of that? Probably not. I think just seeing what Democrat policies have done to the country over the last 12 years, 16 years, has probably helped persuade some young men of that as well. But what Charlie was doing was first and foremost proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ and a worldview based on that, and then showing how that applied to how we vote, how we live our lives, how we order our lives, what we should prioritize. There was another very interesting study that came out just within the last couple of weeks showing the difference between Gen Z, these are roughly, I think, 13 to like 27-year-olds at this point. I may be off by a year or two, but roughly that age group. The difference in priorities, whereas young men, especially those over 16 who voted Republican, prioritized their top priority, having a family, having children. For Gen Z women, who majority voted for Kamala Harris in the last election, their priority list was like out of the top 10, having a family, having children was next to the last. It was second to the bottom. So there's a real disconnect right now between conservative values and liberal values. And a lot of these conservative values, of course, based on a biblical worldview. Sharon made some wonderful meatloaf for lunch today. But again, where do we go from here? It's trying to carry that mantle forward, but first and foremost, not the politics, the gospel. That is what we need to focus on.
Well, Derek, his wife made a great statement about the shooter has no idea what he has awoken, and there's another really good line out there of a giant has come to life, and it is impressive when you look at how many people are uniting, but my fear is that everybody unites over this and then they do nothing. We go back to everybody just sitting on the couch, watching guys like us and not actually going out and doing anything. And, we look at what you look at what's going on social media, And, everybody's comparing the riots to the memorials
Yeah.
and saying we're different, we're not like you. And it's creating a deep rift between the two. And I also believe that one thing that has come out of this that is eye-opening is what's being taught to the kids this generation. What the
Yeah.
teachers are doing, they're teaching their own agenda. If they would just get back to teaching the basics, math, science, history. Think about that. What if they taught real history, not this made up stuff, and motivate kids, young people, to be active, but to be, as you said, gentle and focus on a worldview according to the gospel. So, do you think that we're going to see any change with these woke professors and teachers across America now?
Probably not, but that's the responsibility of us as parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, as the elder generation, to try to have conversations with our children and our grandchildren. You look at some of the protest rallies, the No Kings rallies that have taken place in the U.S. here over the past few months. We've seen some of them in Springfield, Missouri, which is a college town. Missouri State University's up there. And it seems to be it's all, boomers. I'm the tail end of the baby boom, and I'm 63. So it's, boomers who are out there protesting, whereas you get this swing, as I mentioned earlier, with young voters, especially young male voters, getting more conservative and swinging away from the Democratic Party. Um, so I think a lot of these teachers and college professors who've been deeply embedded in academia and education for generations now, pushing critical theory, which is Marxism, this idea that there's always an oppressor class and an oppressed class. And because we have less melanin, we are obviously the oppressors. And so we're bad, and everything that we say is bad. We need to apologize for everything. We need to tear down this country because it was built on the backs of people with more melanin. It's literally chaos, because that worldview then dictates that once a new form of government, a new government is established with new oppressors and new oppressed people, then the oppressed people are going to rise. It's literal chaos. A friend of mine named Raymond Ibrahim, who's a really insightful author and analyst, and his specialty is Islamic history. And I highly recommend his books for people who want to understand why Islam is the true existential threat to the West, even more so than China. Yes, we know China's got advanced electronics and 1.2 billion people, although that's supposed to shrink to about, half that by the end of the century. That's not true with Muslims. Muslims may not have the technical and technological advantages that China has right now, but there's a 1400-year history of Islam that we can draw upon. And if we don't learn the lessons of history, we will be doomed to repeat them. Anyway, Raymond, on his YouTube channel just the other day, made a very, I think, insightful observation that categorizing our political disagreements here in the United States and around the world as left and right is doing ourselves a disservice, because we're locking ourselves into a paradigm that benefits those who we categorize as the left. It's like, look, it's not left and right, it's good versus evil. And we are promoting a worldview that is based on the Bible. It is based on reality. It is based on biological realities. Men can't have babies. Women, in general, are not as fast, strong, big, muscular as men. And because of that, there are certain roles and tasks that are better suited for men and women. One gender is not better than the other, but we are complementary. But when we say, okay, people on the left have this belief that men can be women and women can be men, and et cetera, we're justifying, we're giving some credence to that worldview instead of saying, no, look, I'm sorry, what you are promoting is evil, because what you're promoting is a worldview that encourages children to do self-harm, to sterilize themselves, to mutilate themselves, and uh, does not address what may be an underlying comorbidity, psychological comorbidity that is leading to this gender dysphoria. Um, it is justifying and rationalizing a socialist approach. For example, the current Democratic nominee for New York City mayor, Zohran Mamdani, who is on track to become the mayor of
Mhm.
America's largest city and one of the most influential cities on planet Earth. And he's promoting a socialist agenda that has never worked anywhere it's been tried. And we're giving it credence by saying, well, that's a left wing socialist. No, it's evil. It was invented by a guy named Karl Marx, who was a literal Satanist. I refer you to Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis's book, Give Me Liberty, Not Marxism. Marx was a Satanist. This is a satanic worldview. And we need to stop saying, okay, well, I'm right wing and they're left wing. No, I'm sorry. I am standing on truth. And as Raymond very wisely said in his presentation on his YouTube channel, truth is the rock on which worldviews are founded or on which they are shattered. That's basically where we stand. And so, no more left and right on the daily 5 and 10 update from Skywatch TV. It's going to be right and wrong. It's either going to be biblical or what
Not,
is the opposite of biblical?
yeah.
Yeah, not. So, but again, we're trying to present this in a way so that those who are outside the camp don't see us coming at them with torches and pitchforks. Because, I can say after 20 years in sales, that's not a good way to persuade people over to your side of the aisle. Uh, Gentleness and respect. And I'm preaching to myself here because on social media, the last 24 hours, I find myself having to kind of rein in or trying to rein in, not always successfully, my inner high school debate team captain. Um, and, sometimes you're trying to bludgeon people into submission with superior intellect, which is not always the case, doesn't always work. So, as the proverb says, a gentle answer turneth away wrath. And I need to keep that top of mind a little more often.
Well, it's hard because I go through the same thing. I'm fairly big on social media right now, and you get sucked into it,
Yeah.
if you're not careful. And I was appalled at the proliferation. I can't even talk with the amount of videos of Charlie getting actually shot and slumping over,
Yeah.
and the fever at which people were watching that stuff. They got sucked into it, and now here we are. It would be wonderful as Christians, especially, if this led to us uniting and staying united. I mean, you and I know all we have to do is talk about the rapture, and you've got like a huge debate going, and people are
Yeah.
calling one side names and the other side names. We don't need to do that. I mean, you know, just like in politics, I don't care what your opinion is of the rapture. You can believe whatever you want. I can believe whatever I want. And we can have a discussion about it and walk away friends.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to turn into a war because we know the first casualty of war is the truth. We've
Yeah.
seen it happen. I mean, look at, you brought up Israel. So you look at what happened after the massacre and all that, and it's like the young people seem to think that Israel are like Nazis.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to a young person the other day. I'm not going to mention her name, but she was all about. She's like, "You're a Nazi. You don't believe that men should be transitioned men should participate in women's sports." I don't. I think it's wrong. You
Yeah.
know,
It's dangerous.
it's dangerous, is
Yeah.
right. And uh, but they're susceptible. I mean, I remember. I mean, I'm almost 67, but believe it or not, I was like 18 once. And in my 20s once. It was a long time ago. I don't even, thank God they didn't have cameras back then on your phones. But
Yeah.
I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember as a young person, you tend to always take the position of what you believe is the underdog, whether that's true or not. But it's wonderful to see these kids, as you were talking about, uniting and saying, wait a minute, socialism, if you study it, you're correct, Eric. It's never worked. So why are we going there? It's a slippery slope that we go down, don't you think?
Well, it is. And, we have been defending Israel a lot on social media over the last 2 years. It seemed like the planet was united behind Israel for about a week, and then that has faded away. And now, the longer this war goes on, and this is by design. Hamas knows that the longer the war goes on, and the more images come out of people uh, fleeing burned out buildings, and the better it is for Hamas because the greater world pressure builds on Israel. We've seen a number of nations in Europe. I mean, Spain last year, but this year the UK, Ireland, France, indicating was it? I think Luxembourg just yesterday announced that when the United Nations plans to meet next year later this month, that they will recognize the imaginary state of Palestine. I say imaginary because the facts on the ground are such that there is no contiguous plot of ground that you could point to and say, okay, that's Palestine. The people who, well, I don't want to rabbit trail too far down that road, but the bottom line is Israel has been treated badly by the media. A lot of the people who are saying, well, Israel is committing genocide are basing their opinion on reports by the same media that told us for the last 5 years that Joe Biden was just as sharp as he ever was, and that any reports of his cognitive decline are just a right-wing conspiracy theory, and you're probably a hater who's hateful. And come on, it was plainly obvious to us. People tend to forget. I mean, it's the same media reporting it. We've been in Israel 4 times, and every time we've been there, um, 2 times especially while we were there, things got a little, spicy. Back in 2018, for example, we were there when Trump moved the embassy, the official day. We were there on the 70th anniversary of Israel's Declaration of Independence. And that was the first day the U.S. Embassy opened in Jerusalem. And Hamas declared a day of rage at the border with Gaza, which is about 40 miles away from Jerusalem. And they were burning tires and throwing rocks and stuff. And people back home were freaking out because the media made it seem like all of Israel was on fire.
Mm-hmm.
2023, when we were over there, they were protesting judicial reform because Israel's judicial system is we would not tolerate it here in the United States. The judiciary is its own government. It basically tells the Knesset, which is their Congress, what they can and cannot do. They can overturn any law by saying it's unreasonable. And you don't need to be a lawyer to know that that word means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Anyway, there were a few protests. I mean, one day we were about 10 minutes late getting back to dinner because one intersection had some people who were, slowing down traffic with their signs. But the media over here made it seem like the whole country was on fire and we were getting emails. The airport's closed, the embassy said to get out, and all the parks are closed. None of that was true. None of that was true. So why would we expect the media's reporting on Gaza to be any different? It's not. The media basically it is in the grip, for the most part, of those who hold to these socialist ideals. And frankly, we just need to just say, look, we need to have enough cognitive ability to verify for ourselves. There are enough alternative media sources out there now that we should, okay, CNN is reporting this. Let me see if I can corroborate it somewhere else that's not quite as biased. Or even Fox News going in the other side. Okay, let me see if I can corroborate this somewhere else. We need to use our God-given thinking abilities before jumping to conclusions and before we categorize things as left and right. I can't believe this because this might be a little too left. Let's just analyze it on whether or not it's right and wrong. And our guide for what's right and wrong is in the Bible. Israel is defending itself against a worldview that is guided by a belief in an entity, not the God of the Bible. Allah is not Yahweh, he is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, with a 1400-year history of commanding his followers to conquer, kill, and enslave anyone it comes across. And most of those people just happen to be Christian. The reason the West is called the West is because that's all that was left of Christendom by the time Islam reached its peak of conquest in the early 8th century. That is a fact, and most of us don't even know that. So the reason, as we approach Columbus Day, the reason Columbus sailed west was not just to find a new route to India. He was hoping to find a mythical character named Prester John, who was supposedly leading this wonderful kingdom in the East somewhere, a Christian king who had this wonderful kingdom. And they thought maybe we can make contact with Prester John and he'll help us overthrow, conquer the Ottoman Empire. So these Muslims will quit invading Europe because they couldn't go east to get to India, because sailing through the Mediterranean and crossing down into the Red Sea was too dangerous. That's why Columbus went west. It was because of the Muslims.
Yeah, it, again, biblically, we're supposed to use discernment, in everything we do. And it's that seems to get thrown right out the window. The Charlie Kirk thing has shown us that it's like, well, let's just throw discernment out. I intentionally did not do any shows about what happened to Charlie Kirk for a couple of days because I couldn't verify what I was reading, and the whole thing now that's coming out that I can't verify is this stuff about like people knew that he was going to go and assassinate Charlie Kirk and they didn't do anything, I, you can't, it's hard to verify. They
Yeah.
did see the text messages, but yeah, so what? I mean, the media will spin anything out of proportion and they'll tell their story. And that's what it is. It's a story, you know.
Clickbait, clickbait. Everybody needs to, get clicks to monetize their channels, monetize their networks. Yeah, there are a lot of stories out there right now. In fact, the one that has really got me agitated today, and this is why I've been engaging on social media so much the last 24 hours. I posted my update today to Skywatch TV regarding Charlie Kirk's death, and it's about the claim being made by Candace Owens. The implication. She's being very careful now to say, "No, I didn't say
Hmm.
Israel's responsible for his death." She just sort of really blatantly implied it. Maybe she's being a little more careful with her words after getting sued by France's President Macron for doing an 8-part series on why his wife Brigitte is a dude.
Yeah.
So Candace is part of a very conservative sect within Roman Catholicism, the same one that Mel Gibson belongs to, that believes, as they did prior to Vatican II, that the Jews are perfidious, and that was part of the catechism, perfidious Jews, and that they were responsible for killing Jesus. As I read my Bible, it was a collaboration between the Jewish religious authorities and the Gentiles, which would be, us. And the Bible tells us there is none righteous, no, not one. So anyway, she is making this implication and then trying to say, well, I'm just asking questions. Okay, all right. So I took her to task and, of course, getting a lot of pushback. Well, how do you know they weren't? Come on. Charlie Kirk, even though he'd been critical of Israel's approach in Gaza, was a very pro-Israel person. He was a supporter of Israel. In fact, as you know, Mike, Jeannie was with us on our 2018 tour, and Erica Kirk, who was not married to Charlie at the time, was on that tour with us. Now, she was there because of Mike Heiser, not because of Sharon and me, but we did meet Erica and her mother again at Mike Heiser's memorial a few years later after she and Charlie had married. But she and Charlie went back to Israel. with the same tour company, our friends, Aaron and Eddie Lipkin, who are Orthodox Jews. And so they met Charlie. They were very impressed with him. And I can tell you from their point of view and the people that they know, Charlie is held in very high regard in Israel. Israel had nothing to gain by trying to silence Charlie Kirk. And if they wanted to silence Charlie Kirk, I mean, if the Mossad is as all powerful as many of the people seem to think, certainly they had ways to do it that were much less costly and less risky than getting some 22-year-old kid living with a transgender furry to pull the trigger. They could have done something to discredit him, especially in this age of AI and deep fakes. There are plenty of ways you could make somebody look like a really awful, horrible person so that nobody would listen to him anymore. But again, Charlie was pro-Israel, so this whole narrative is senseless. But it's gained a lot of traction on the internet. And
Oh, I
again,
mean, it's
we're
gained a lot.
not using critical thinking
Yeah,
skills.
it's gained a lot of traction, and like, when I was reading the stuff about uh, the furry thing, I'm like, what is this?
Yeah,
And I mean, I guess it's like a really big deal, but
it's something I wish I did never heard of.
yeah, I can't look at my dogs the same way anymore, and it's like, they it's just this weirdness that's
I
out there
know,
and going
I
on.
know.
Now it's front and center, you know,
Yeah.
and
And there have been reports, and the FBI is reportedly investigating some of the communication amongst some of these groups. And I talked about this yesterday on 5 and 10 for Skywatch TV, that there are reports that are being investigated of messages that seem to indicate foreknowledge of what Tyler Robinson is alleged to have done. So, but who knows? This will come out. But again, people who are throwing it out there and saying, well, Israel could have done it, the Mossad could have done it. Well, yeah, pigs might fly too
yeah,
if they
yeah,
had wings.
exactly.
And,
It
come on.
wouldn't be, I can guarantee our listeners that if the Mossad was involved in this, it wouldn't be some 22-year-old standing on top of a roof. And I read an article about the whole thing from a sniper, a SEAL, retired, and he was saying there's no way this was a professional. I mean, you wouldn't, a sniper would not shoot someone in the neck. They'd either aim for their chest or their head, and they'd hit their target.
Yeah, yeah. This is likely that he was aiming at for a headshot and not taking into account that over a couple hundred yards you're going to get about 6 inches of drop. I've read. I'm
Yep.
not a hunter. I'm not a sniper, so I don't know. But I've read that the amount of drop over 600 feet with that caliber bullet may account for the fact that it hit Charlie in the neck instead of in the head. But again, the bottom line is, whenever there's something like this, people rush to be the first to put out something that'll generate clicks. Sometimes it's the corporate media, the legacy media. Sometimes it's, random YouTubers. And in this case, Candace Owens, who's making a name for herself by trying to blame everything on Israel and the Jews. I don't see any evidence of it there. Um, the claim that was made was that there was a wealthy Jewish American hedge fund investor by the name of Bill Ackman who had pardon the expression, a come to Jesus meeting with Charlie in August and tried to intimidate him or buy him off, and that Charlie refused. Ackman has gone public and saying what she claims is slanderous. That's not the way the meeting went down. Here is exactly what happened. And it's there will be people who believe it regardless because they want to find reasons to confirm their bias. And when you reject that and push back on it, well, it's only because you're not doing the same kind of research. You're not doing the deep dive that she's doing or that he's doing or that they're doing. You're like, okay, believe what you like, but logic dictates that when something like this happens, somebody benefits.
Oh yeah.
And Israel's not the one who benefits here. The fallen realm thought they would benefit, but as we have seen, and I think this is the proper response, we've seen the prayer vigils, We've seen a fire ignite that is spreading among young people. And Sharon said, as we discussed this on our podcast over the weekend, I think very wisely, this is, as Charlie's organization is named, a turning point
Hmm.
for the USA. The question is whether we're going to turn towards revival or revolution.
Hmm.
And I pray that it's revival.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, but it is up to us as the remnant body to lead the way, and I just want to encourage all our listeners to use that critical thinking and to use this event that happened to spread the word and to be vocal and not be afraid,
Yeah.
because a lot of people they're afraid, right now. I don't know, man. If I speak my opinion, someone's going to shoot me. You know what? No. You have to have that key component in your armor, which is faith. You know, Without faith, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
You have to have the faith. So, well, listen, Derek, I want to thank you for joining us and trying to, get our arms around this thing. And hopefully after the big memorial next week, things will calm down a little bit. But we can't forget the unity that has come out of this, the goodness of that, you know, and get away from all the garbage,
Yeah.
stay away from the furry people, I mean, it's like, it's just, we're at, as you so well said, a turning point, or
Mm.
Sharon said, a turning point.
Yeah.
And you can go one way or the other. As Derek so perfectly said, right or wrong, you know, and we need to look at that and move forward. So, guys, that's going to wrap us for today. Uh, you all know by now, I think, that Hear the Watchman is going to go back to Springfield, Missouri for Remnant Rising 2.0. And we're going to do it again and do it bigger and better. Derek and Sharon will be there. Kenny C will be there again. And we have a whole list of people that we'll be announcing as we get down the road here a little bit. One of the real highlights, I believe, is Carl Tykrib. I think is going to be able to come in,
Oh, fantastic.
and he's an amazing speaker.
Yeah.
Anyway, go to hearthewatchmen.com. If you haven't seen what happened in Springfield in August of this year, you can get the on demand, you get it forever, you keep it. It's really easy to access. Go to our website and avail yourself of that. But again, Derek, thanks for joining us today.
Always an honor, Mike. Thank you.
We'll see you again here at The Last Watch.